Trump's approval rating just hit a number his own White House can't spin away. Two brand new national polls, both released in the first 2 weeks of July 2026, show the same brutal pattern. And if you only remember one number from this video, remember this one: -26. That's Trump's net approval rating according to the Economist/YouGov poll conducted July 3rd through July 6th, with 35% of Americans approving of his job performance and 61% disapproving. That net rating of -26 matches the lowest level recorded in that series back in May 2026, and it ties the lowest point seen across both of Trump's terms and Joe Biden's presidency combined. Newsweek. That's not a typo. Not a one-off. Not a bad sample. It's the floor. And here's the twist almost nobody's talking about yet. A second, completely independent pollster just confirmed it. A Focaldata poll, conducted online between June 26th and June 30th, puts Trump's net approval at -23, described by the pollster itself as an all-time low in its series. Two different companies. Two different methodologies. The same devastating headline. Newsweek. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why this is happening, why the White House's response might be making things worse, and why one major pollster is telling a completely different story, a contradiction that could decide how you should actually read the next round of polls before the midterms. So let's start with the headline claim. Stripped down to its simplest form, Trump's approval rating is sitting at or near record lows across multiple independent national surveys, and it's being driven by rising disapproval among U.S. adults, not a sudden single event. Stable approval combined with rising disapproval suggests Trump isn't losing his core support. Resistance to his presidency is deepening at the margins, and that's a trend that's historically difficult to reverse. MSN Newsweek. If you're new to how this works, net approval is simply the percentage of people who approve, minus the percentage who disapprove. A positive number means more people like the job he's doing than dislike it. A negative number means the opposite. Right now, depending on which poll you look at, Trump is anywhere from moderately underwater to deeply underwater, and that range itself is about to become the most interesting part of the story. A recent Economist/YouGov survey found that 60% of respondents believe Trump has not focused on the country's most pressing problems, and 61% said the country is on the wrong track, with only 28% saying it's headed in the right direction. That's the emotional backdrop every one of these numbers sits inside. Trump's approval ratings have been net negative for an extended period throughout his second term, with multiple polls placing him below 40% approval nationally. This isn't new territory for him. What's new is how. Consistently, it's showing up across completely different polling organizations at a moment when control of Congress is about to be decided. AOL Essex. Coming up, the one decision back in February that pollsters say broke his numbers for good. Most people already forgot about it. The data hasn't. Let's rewind. According to Forbes, Trump's weekly approval rating hasn't risen above 36% since the United States and Israel attacked Iran on February 28, 2026. Before that, he'd been hovering around 40%. That single event marks the point where his numbers started sliding and never fully recovered. The Iran war drove inflation concerns higher, with energy costs surging and housing affordability worsening, compounding voter frustration with the administration's economic management. Essex. Then spring hits. Approval claws back a little. Silver Bulletin's own tracking later confirms there was a partial recovery underway by early June. But it doesn't last. By May 2026, the Economist/YouGov series hits its first record low of the year. Newsweek. Then late June, the Focaldata poll lands, and it's worse. An all-time low for that pollster, at net -23. Newsweek. Then just days later, the Economist/YouGov July wave comes in. In early June, Trump's approval had stood at 35%, with 60% disapproving, a net of -25. The new July poll shows approval completely flat at 35%, but disapproval climbing to 61%, pushing the net score down to match its worst level yet. Newsweek. Same approval, higher disapproval. That's the story. People aren't warming to him, they're just getting angrier. And just as this story was breaking, a second data source told a completely different tale. Here's where it gets as of July 14th, 2026, Silver Bulletin's aggregate shows Trump's net approval rating at -17, up from -17.9 just 1 week earlier, and up from -18.5 1 month earlier. In fact, his net approval is currently higher than it's been since mid-April. Nate Silver. So which is it? Is Trump collapsing or recovering? Silver's own team admits part of the uptick is coming from individual pollsters showing far better than average results. Jail Partners recently released a Trump -6 result, and Tucker Research and Scripps News released a -1 result right before Independence Day. Silver himself calls that Tucker Research number a massive outlier, but notes that many of the most influential polls in his average still sit right around -17, including Quinnipiac at -17, the Independent Center at -16, TIP at -16, and Echelon Insights at -17. Nate Silver. So even the good news version of this story still has Trump roughly 17 points underwater. This isn't a debate between disaster and success. It's a debate between disaster and merely very bad. And when you drill down into where the pain is actually concentrated, the picture gets even sharper. Breaking it down issue by issue, the Focaldata survey shows housing is one of Trump's weakest areas. Just 22% approve of his handling of it, a net rating of -32. On inflation and cost of living, it's even worse. 20% approval against 67% disapproval, a net of -47. On jobs and the economy specifically, it's 29% approval to 56% disapproval, a net of -27. MSN. Read those numbers again. -47 on inflation. That's not a bad news cycle. That's a structural collapse in trust on the single issue voters say matters most to them. Wait until you hear how the White House is responding to all of this, because their statement doesn't deny the numbers. It does something much stranger. The White House has rejected the polling entirely, calling it an incomplete picture of the president's record. White House spokesman Davis Ingle told Newsweek, "No other president in history has accomplished more for the American people than President Trump, who is working tirelessly to create jobs, cool inflation, increase housing affordability, and more," adding that the administration has made historic progress, and this is just the beginning as his agenda continues taking effect. MSN Newsweek. That gap between the administration's language and the electorate's lived experience at the grocery store is exactly the kind of gap that tends to widen, not close, heading into an election year. Presidential approval near record lows across multiple polls signals not just short-term dissatisfaction, but a broader, more entrenched erosion in public confidence, and that pattern is particularly significant heading into the 2026 midterm elections, when sustained net negative approval has historically been associated with electoral headwinds for the president's party. MSN. But before you assume this is a completely one-sided story, there's a version of it Trump's team isn't wrong about. It's worth being fair here, because the polling industry itself admits this is messier than any single headline suggests. As Silver Bulletin puts it, there's inevitably a lot of disagreement from survey to survey, not just because of statistical variation, but because pollsters have long had trouble pegging down Trump's popularity specifically. Newsweek. That's a real, substantive point. Trump has always polled unusually inconsistently compared to past presidents, and the Silver Bulletin recovery from -18.5 to -17 over the past month is a real, measurable movement, not statistical noise dressed up as a trend. If you only watched his numbers through that one lens, you'd reasonably conclude he's stabilizing, not collapsing. So there are two honest ways to read this data. But only one of them survives contact with the cost of living numbers we just showed you. A -47 net rating on the single issue voters say matters most isn't the kind of gap that closes on vibes alone. Now here's why none of this is just political theater, because if this trend holds, it changes something in your life directly. Not in a year. Possibly before the midterms even happen. Voters consistently rank inflation and prices, jobs and the economy, and healthcare as the top 3 most important issues facing the country, a ranking that's remained steady since the. And it's not confined to one issue either. More than half of respondents also said they disapproved of Trump's handling of healthcare, education, abortion, and the environment. That breadth matters. A president can survive being unpopular on one issue. Surviving broad-based disapproval across almost every major issue category at once is a different problem entirely, and it's the kind of problem that tends to show up at the ballot box. AOL. Which brings us to what happens next, because this story is nowhere near finished. Every single poll released between now and November is another data point in a fight over who controls Congress for the next 2 years, and right now, the two biggest polling operations in the country can't even agree on whether Trump is getting better or worse. That contradiction alone is going to keep shaping headlines for months. The next wave of polling is expected within weeks, and it will either confirm the Economist/YouGov and Focaldata record low story, or it will back up Silver Bulletin's slow recovery narrative. Whichever way it breaks will tell us something real about which direction the midterms are heading. If you don't want to miss the moment this trend either confirms itself or breaks completely, subscribe now, because we'll have that follow-up the second the next polls land. And in the next video, we're going deeper into the one number buried inside these polls that both parties are quietly terrified of, a number that might matter more than the top-line approval rating itself.